Good evening, everyone. My name is Celeste de la Cabra. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to go ahead and discuss the very first package that I received from my new Vinegar Syndrome subscription. If you're not aware of what the Vinegar Syndrome subscription is, you can go to their website for more details, but basically you pay a flat fee in advance. Mine was about $500 for 6 months of their releases, and you get everything that's under the Vinegar Syndrome line. So you don't get anything like the VSAs or the VSUs, but you get the main Vinegar Syndrome line. And you don't get any partner labels, but you do get coupons to all that stuff that is released within your subscription time period. So yeah, I had been curious about it for a long time, and I finally decided to go ahead and pull the trigger on it and see how it goes. So I received this package at the beginning of the month, or maybe late last month, I don't really remember. And the reason why I didn't just go ahead and turn on the camera and show it all to you immediately is because I wanted to take the time to actually watch everything and be able to tell you about it and give you recommendations as to what I think is worth grabbing if you don't have the subscription. Because I know that Vinegar Syndrome is definitely a dice roll for a lot of people. And I think that there is a pretty interesting mix of quality in this first box that I received, and it looks like next month might be similar. So I'm going to try to do this every month for the remainder of my subscription, and then at the end I'll do a big retrospective and see if I think it was worth it, see if I want to renew for a full year, all that sort of stuff. So we have 3 titles to talk about today, so let's get into it. So the first film that we're going to talk about today is SHRIEK of the Mutilated. Now this is an old, let's call it a Bigfoot film. Believe it came out in the 1970s or the 1980s? 1974. Yeah. So I guess let's do a quick unboxing first. So there's the front, there's the spine, there's the back, there's the other spine. The whole thing is embossed. It's a really beautiful image. I'm in love with this artwork, to be completely honest with you. We take it out. Here's the original theatrical poster, and the spine, and the back. If you want to read that, go ahead and hit pause. Then here's the inside. And there's a reversible cover art. So when I get slipcovers, I like to go ahead and put in the original or whatever's different in terms of the actual case artwork, so that way I get both. Like I said, it's a Bigfoot / Yeti film. They seem to be a little bit confused about their cryptozoology, but I think it's supposed to be a Yeti. In any case, there's not a ton in the Bigfoot horror subgenre. And I think this is one of the first, but I could be mistaken about that. But essentially, an anthropology professor invites his students out for what is essentially a Bigfoot hunt. Okay, so I just checked on the back, and they definitely refer to it as the Abominable Snowman. So we're gonna be consistent from now on. But essentially, they go out Yeti hunting and stay in the professor's friend's cabin. And talking about this film is honestly really difficult without talking about the ending. And I'm going to resist doing that. But let's just say I think that by the end, it kind of comes together and starts to make sense and kind of does a self-critique of sorts. It's kind of meta in the way that it plays with the audience's expectations. But for the bulk of the film, you get what is essentially an extremely cheesy B horror film that is definitely not going to be for everybody. I know I've seen a lot of people in the Vinegar Syndrome group and just elsewhere saying that this was completely garbage, is complete trash, and I have no idea why they released it, or it's going straight on eBay or whatever. Personally, I liked it, I'm going to be honest. I think I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think it is really charming. I'm really a big fan of these old kind of schlocky homemade horror films that were made on really low budgets and were just kind of driven purely by passion, because they don't really have a lot of money and they're probably not going to make a lot of money. They're just doing it because they want to make art. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it has a campiness to it that is highly entertaining. I don't recall the name of the actress, and it's not on the back of the disc, but there is a Velma lookalike in this who I am just now head over heels in love with, so that's another plus. Setting the film aside, which I think is definitely questionable and definitely depends on your tolerance for schlock and camp, depends on how much fun you can have with it, whether or not you're watching it in a group or by yourself. I think all these factors kind of play into it, but overall I think it's very fun. What I'd like to talk about a little more are the special features. The interviews that are included, I think, are excellent. So there's an interview on here called Yeti Again, which is, let's call it a great pun. It's an interview with Roberta Findlay. So this actually was so fascinating to me and kind of took me down a rabbit hole learning about her and this director. Basically, she goes into how they were in a relationship and they got married, and she left him, and he said that he wouldn't finish making this film unless she came back to him and did the cinematography for it. She said that she learned cinematography like in Venezuela, I think they were shooting a film, and he just straight up couldn't communicate with anybody else except for her, so that's how she got the job. And then after that, she kind of had a very prolific career shooting adult films, shooting exploitation horror films. She has like 60 titles to her name or something like that, and I think it's incredible that I never heard of her before this. Some more interesting anecdotes from it. I found it fascinating that there seems to be a very strong consensus that the director was a very troubled and disturbed person. He grew up in a really repressive Catholic environment. I wonder what that's like. And he essentially was struggling with really dark sexual repression and didn't really have a moral footing to stand on. And he kind of let out all his anger and his aggression and his really fucked up views about women through horror films. And in the interview, Roberta pretty much plainly states that, like, I'm pretty sure that if he didn't make these films where he can act out his fantasies of murdering women, he would have done it for real. And the video essayist seems to have the same opinion. I'm glad he found an outlet as opposed to engaging in real life violence. But it kind of definitely puts a spin on the film you're watching when you think about the motivations behind it. Another thing I found interesting is that in this interview and in another interview that I read with her online, she seems really bitter or resistant to the idea that her work was feminist, or that she herself is a feminist, or that she was important to feminism because she was such a prolific and pioneering director in her genre. She seems to be like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't know what that means. Don't call me a feminist. I'm not interested. I don't know what's going on there, but I think it's interesting. Because I think it clearly is like part of feminism to be inhabiting an essentially all male space and being the creative force behind so many of these films. That's just an interesting tangent aside. The last bit from the interview that I gleaned that I thought was really interesting was that she hates horror movies. She doesn't like them. She's never seen Shriek of the Mutilated. She doesn't watch her films when they're done. She thinks they're trash. She thinks that they're essentially putting out a product, and she does her best to include artistic elements, but essentially she thinks that everything they do is garbage. So that's interesting. There's a great interview with the producer on here where he essentially just kind of talks about how this was his one shot at his dream of filmmaking before he packed it in and just sold out, as it were, or whatever. But my favorite anecdote from that was when he relayed the story of when his daughter went to a college orientation, and some people were having a conversation about what's the worst film ever made. And she was like, well, it's Plan 9 from Outer Space, right? Like, that's the consensus. And then one of the people there was like, come here, I got one that's way worse. Like, you won't believe how bad it is. You want me to tell you what it's called? And she was like, what? And he says, Shriek of the Mutilated. And she goes, holy shit, my dad made that movie. Apparently, he says that was his proudest moment in terms of creating this film, was that somebody designated it the worst film ever made. Finally, we have a audio essay by cryptozoology author David Coleman. I'm a huge fan of video essays and audio essays on Blu-rays, especially when they're done by like really thoughtful and knowledgeable academics, and this is definitely no exception. He really goes deep into the history of the director, into the context surrounding the film, the place that the film has in Bigfoot movie history, because he wrote a book on that, like Bigfoot movies in general. Maybe the most fascinating anecdote that I found on the whole disc was through this video essay, where he relays the story of how after he made this movie, he invented some kind of device that could better shoot 3D or something like that. I don't remember exactly the mechanics of it, but it was highly successful. It made him a good amount of money, and some producers in Hong Kong bought the rights to the device from him and also hired him to be a consultant on their films to teach them how to use it. He had a deathly fear of flying his whole life. And when he finally was convinced to get on the plane to go to Hong Kong, the helicopter landed, missed the landing pad, and the blades essentially tore him to pieces, along with 3 or 4 other people. My fucking jaw was on the floor when I heard that anecdote. It's just the most brutal, horrible, karmic incident you can think of. Sometimes life is stranger than fiction. I think I've talked enough about Shriek and the Mutilated here. The supplements I think are better than the film, but the film is fun too, so check it out. I'm going to try to go through this one fast. This is a 2-film pack from director Jess Franco. This is 2 Undercover Angels and Kiss Me Monster. So that's both sides of the slip. And you have that one, and you have that one. There's the back of the disc. There's your disc art. And the reversible is just the poster for Kiss Me Monster. So you can just decide which one you want. Now, to be honest with you, don't have a lot to say about this because I don't really understand what the fuck happened in the thing that I watched. I watched the first one and I really honestly was astonished at how little seemed to be happening and how little I understood it and how little I enjoyed it. There's like, I don't know, kind of something here and there to hang on to, but I don't know what this was marketed as, but it's essentially like European James Bond with 2 women instead of a dude. If you know me well, you know that I despise James Bond and really that whole style. But at least that is coherent and well made. This is just like nothing. I mean, nothing. There's nothing to hang on to. It's just empty. I despise it. I watched the second one with one of my partners to be like, hey, you know, I couldn't see a single redeeming thing about this last one. Maybe the second one will be better, or if it's just as bad, maybe you can explain to me why this is so terrible. Like, I can get a second set of eyes on this. And we watched it together, and I fucking fell asleep about 3/4 of the way through it. And I woke up and I was like, is it over? And they were like, yeah, I finished it. It was horrible. We both decided that it was just absolute trash. So I've heard mixed reviews on this. I think they're some of the worst films I've ever seen, to be completely honest with you. The second one gets even more incoherent. It's just kind of, it's like he had a series of ideas for images that he wanted, but not a coherent idea as to the plot or the theme or really anything that he actually wanted to explore aside from like a sketchbook of visual cues that he wanted to incorporate. Again, I struggle to think of how this was marketed and how disappointed people must be because it's not a horror film. There's like one horror element, maybe. It's not even really an action film. It's not exploitation. It's not softcore. There's like barely any nudity in it or anything sexy at all. I mean, the women are gorgeous, but that's it. Like, there's nothing there I'm repeating myself. I hate these. I'm selling this on eBay. I would have never purchased this in a million years had I known what it was. But hopefully I can make my money back on it. Okay, and finally we have the biggest piece of this package, righting wrongs. So here's the slipcase, there's the spine, there's the back. Take the stuff out. Here's the booklet, here's the back of the booklet, and I'll go ahead and kind of flip through it for you so you can kind of see the sort of thing you get. All right, and then there's your slipcover, spine, back artwork, other spine. I reversed the cover art, so this is the reversible cover art. There's the back, there's the spine, and it comes with 3 discs. So there's 1, 2, 3. So this is the thing that took me the longest to get through because I wanted to watch as much of this as possible to talk about it and fully recommend it. So the history behind this film is kind of confusing, so let me kind of attempt to make it easy for you all. There's 3 cuts of the film. There's the original Hong Kong cut with the original ending. There's the second Taiwanese international cut with a completely different ending. And then there's the American cut, which is entitled Above the Law, which is essentially the Taiwanese cut, but with different dialogue, different dubbing, obviously, and a slightly different ending just because the dialogue has changed and it changes the meaning of what happens quite a bit. I'm going to do this without spoiling the end of it because when I tried to ask people, they were just like, oh, watch the ending where this happens as opposed to the ending where this happens. I'm just like, and most information I can find about it, that's just how they talk about it. So if you're really, really dead set on not getting this spoiled for you, you've come to the right place. And you should buy it and just watch it because people are going to spoil it. But I won't. I recommend the first cut, the original Hong Kong cut by far. I think it's the most competent. I think it has the best ending, and I think it's the purest representation of the director's vision. My thoughts on the film itself, I think it's a really amazing spectacle in terms of the martial arts. The fights in it are just incredible. I think it's pretty well shot. It's pretty well acted. The story is okay. I'm going to say it's okay. Like, there is a story. There's a pretty consistent theme that it explores. It's kind of hinted at in the title, Righting Wrongs. It's kind of the idea of a lawyer going against everything he stands for and taking justice in his own hands and kind of interrogating the principles that led him to be a lawyer in the first place. It's overall a very bleak film. There's not a lot of hope in this one at all, to be honest. But yeah, I think the real attraction here is the fights. The pacing and the editing is very bizarre, especially if you're not used to these type of films. I mean, it is like as rapid cut as you can possibly get. The dubbing is another thing that's kind of hard to get used to if you're not used to it, because people are speaking different languages, and they went ahead and redubbed it 10 different which ways, and so there's not really a consistent tone to the voices across the different cuts. Yeah, especially like at the end, it just ends with like no room for breathing or like thinking about what happened. It just immediately cuts to credits, and then it does a highlight reel of the fights again during the credits, which I think is funny. But yeah, I didn't watch all 3 cuts the whole way through. I watched the first one the whole way through. I watched the last reel of the second one, and then I skipped around in the American cut just to kind of gauge the differences between some of the dialogue choices and to see if the ending was different again. So on the 3rd disc, the entire thing is just the documentary, The Best of Martial Arts. It's a 91-minute documentary from 1990, hosted by John Saxon. Yeah, this documentary, I almost liked more than the film, but it's kind of close. I like them both a lot, actually. The documentary is essentially just kind of a history of martial arts cinema, the ethos behind it, the importance of it. At the end of the day, it's really mostly like a highlight reel. Like, there are so many clips of martial arts films in this, just kind of, it's just, that is what it is essentially. It's a highlight reel with narration throughout. It gave me a bunch of films to add to my watch list, and yeah, I highly recommend not skipping over it because I think it's a lot of fun and it's pretty informative, especially if you're brand new to the genre. Like, I would consider myself. I've seen a handful of films like this, and obviously the films that they inspired, but I'm not like a martial arts junkie like a lot of people are. In terms of the interviews, Cynthia Rothrock has a really fascinating one where she kind of looks back on it and her experience coming up in acting in these films. She talks about the differences between the way she would have to approach acting in Hong Kong films versus in American films when she finally, breached into that. Because when she's doing Hong Kong films, she can't actually understand what her fellow actors are saying to her. So she was just kind of waiting for her own lines as opposed to reacting to lines. And in American films, she had to learn to actually process and work with other actors as opposed to just kind of being an island. Another fascinating anecdote from this is that she had a knee injury on her right knee, which is her predominant knee, her predominant leg. So she did everything you see in the film with the leg injury, which it kind of hurts to watch it now knowing that, but it's just 10 times more impressive. I think she rules. So in terms of what I would recommend, I know that this slipcase edition is kind of expensive, so it really just depends on how important this box, which is obviously nice, and this booklet, which I confess I haven't read, is to you. You get all of the content and a really nice slipcover with just this, so maybe wait till it sells out and just get the slipcover edition. I don't know when that will come out. I imagine at some point, but that would be my recommendation to you all. I actually really like the way this spine looks and how it'll look on the shelf. So I don't know. I'm actually maybe considering selling this slip box. So we'll see what I decide to do, but I'll probably just keep it. Okay, so that's the stack from Vinegar Syndrome this month. I hope this video was informative to you. Hope it saves you some money or maybe gets you into some films that you hadn't previously had on your radar. That's it for me. Expect another video like this sometime next month, depending on how long it takes me to get through everything. There's a box set coming next month, so it might take me longer, but patience, bear with me, I appreciate it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm really trying to grow this channel, so that would mean a lot to me. My favorite thing about this is reading the comments that you all leave for me, so please leave me lovely comments to read and we can have a dialogue. In the description are links for my Instagram, Letterboxd, and Rate Your Music if you want to hang out outside of YouTube land. So that's all. Thanks for tuning in. I love you very much, and I hope that your day ends better than it started.